Like, as long as it's got such a long history of being forced on people. I don't know where I was going with that, but yeah.
Well, so can I respond to that real quick? So what's interesting is like the beginning of Christianity was literally the martyrdom of Jesus Christ, right? Like he was killed by the religious leaders for not complying with what they wanted. He was the one put on the cross and killed. And then the first apostles are all being killed also. And then the first Christians are being killed by a pagan society for not surrendering to the pagan idols, for not worshiping Caesar as God, for not participating in the Roman pagan festivals. And so the beginning of the Christian story is Christians being slaughtered and oppressed by a pagan society for not complying up until the point we get like 300 years later, and then Christianity becomes mandated by Constantine on everybody. So there was a flip there where we had several hundred years in our beginning where we didn't oppress. There was no one oppressed by Christianity. The Christians were the ones oppressed.
Well, that's because you didn't have any power at the time.
Yeah, we didn't have any power, and we weren't the power. The Romans were the power, and then when the Romans could not kill off this religion because too many people were willing to die for it, they said, okay, so we'll become that religion and we'll also control it, and we'll also canonize the book and tell you what you can believe and can't believe outside of it.
That is true.
But it's the same power
I
mechanism.
don't think that's why we became Catholic. I think it's because, if I remember correctly, the emperor or whatever was trying to marry someone else or something like that, and he couldn't, so he decided to push the religion onto his people. I'll
No,
research it.
I think
I'll
you're
get
confusing
the
it
story.
for British history. That
Yeah,
happened
you
in
don't.
Britain.
King Henry,
Yeah,
and like the split from the Catholic Church.
Okay.
No,
But
but
I mean,
he's right about
One
Constantine.
second.
That's genuinely how it went. And then once he adopted Christianity, he did force it on the Roman Empire, and that's how Christianity took a foothold. But you're right, it did turn full reversal because then they killed out all the pagan worshippers, right? And they completely dissipated the pagan religions of the Romans. So I agree with you. There was that flip from being the oppressed and then becoming the oppressor.
yes, the consistent thing there, though, would be, I mean, the Roman Empire was a colonizing, imperialistic thing, and it just changed its religion. But it's kind of the same group of oppressors all throughout history, going back, whether they were pagan or whether they were, I would say, quote unquote Christian. It's still the same government forces doing what they did. And then when we get to Europe, people were executed. When we get to like the Inquisition and things like that, like if you spoke anything against the Bible, you were
Chris,
killed.
you are breaking up very heavily. I don't know if I'm the only one noticing it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm hearing it too.
The other point I'm adding is that all throughout Europe, like it's not just like people taken from Africa that are oppressed in the name of Christianity. All the Europeans are being oppressed
I know, I agree with you.
by the government in the name of Christianity also. If you committed blasphemy, you were tortured and killed by the government. I don't know. It's just to me, it's a matter of like dividing right religion from wrong religion, I guess. Like truth from lie, you know?
Sorry. I'm not. Sorry, I'm a bit distracted, but I guess 1 second. Sorry, Deirdre wants to come on. Oh, I'd love to hear her perspective on this. Hey, hun, how are you?
Hey, I wanted to share something with you. I don't know why this just dawned on me. It was weird because something had happened and last night on TikTok, but I didn't know that ethically, I guess that you are Jewish by your mother.
Oh, yeah.
So my mom like married into the Mennonite community, and she didn't speak a lot about it, but I know that she is Jewish and her mom is Jewish, but they never like practiced or anything like that. And I guess that makes me Jewish by blood.
You're Jewish. Look at
Yeah, that's
that.
so
You're
funny.
Jewish.
Yeah, I just realized this. I was actually looking because I have the Torah, but I can't like it's in like Hebrew. It was like kind of passed down from my I guess like my grandfather and stuff. He's passed, but there was like a small Jewish community in Ireland, and my great grandfather, and I knew like helped fund like establish. There's a Irish Jewish museum in Dublin, and I know that he had participated in that. And I did a Google, and I found his name and his story online last night.
Oh, did you really? Wait, you found
Yeah,
That
that's
is
really
really,
cool.
really cool, Deirdre. I visited the Dublin Jewish community because I'm in
yeah,
Scotland, and I have close
yeah.
ties with the many Irish Jews came to live in England and Scotland at one stage. But they have a wonderful Deirdre. They have a wonderful museum. Oh, she's gone into pause. She paused herself. Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
So
I'm
they've got
here.
a wonderful synagogue there, and the museum is just they're lovely people.
Yeah, I don't. I wish I would have known. He passed in think it was like 97 or something. I was like 6 or 7, and I think I've met him like once, but because of the separation with the community and everything, it's complicated because my mom essentially married my dad and joined the Mennonite community. But his name is Raphael Sev, and I looked him up, and he was a big founder in part, and he was actually an activist, and that's my great grandfather, and I think that's really cool.
Oh, I wonder if
That
he would have
is
known
really
because I don't know if you. Sorry, Faye. I
no, no,
don't
no, no,
know
no.
if you
I
would have
was just
known
saying it's cool. Yeah.
uh, Deirdre, that one of the former presidents of Israel was Chaim Herzog, and Chaim Herzog was actually born in Dublin, Ireland. His father was the chief rabbi of Ireland, and he was an Olympic swimmer representing Ireland before he went to Israel.
I didn't know any of this. And like, I just
Yeah,
knew like kind of like what my mom has told me. And then I have some things that were kind of passed down that I like left with me when I left the community and stuff. But my mom didn't talk about it very much. And I knew that she had mentioned that she was Jewish but not raised. And I didn't know that, like, I didn't know any of that. I guess I pieced it together that I guess technically by
yeah,
blood, but like, because I assumed I wasn't because I didn't because my great grandfather and obviously my great grandmother were, but then my grandmother married an Irish man, and then had
yeah,
my mother, and so I guess I assumed she was Jewish, but I wasn't. But I guess it passed down from the mom, so I guess
yeah.
technically I am.
You're in the fam.
Yeah. Yeah, so
You're in the
I
family.
when I found this out, I like was joking with my friend because I was born in the Mennonite community, so I was like, yeah, I was like I'm like was like religiously screwed either way. No.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. No matter how you would have been born or grown
Deirdre,
up.
I'm going
Sorry.
to Deirdre, I'm going to write down in the comments the name of the president, and maybe if you look at
Yeah,
your grandfather, and maybe his
know
family
each
and your
other.
family existed at the same time. So I'm putting it now. His
Yeah,
son is
yeah, I
now
would love that. I'm gonna screenshot it. I'm
yeah,
like I was surprised to even like to be able to Google him and find some stuff. Like I know that my mom had mentioned that, and I don't know a lot of history, and like I've met my grandmother um like a couple times, and we've been to Ireland a couple times, but that was very controlled because of the community I was in. And my
yeah,
mom unfortunately thought because she was in a Mennonite community with my father that Judaism was really really bad and opposing her beliefs, so she didn't really speak about it very much.
yeah.
um and so I don't know a lot, and I can't just call her and ask her. She's not going to tell me anything, and she doesn't speak to me. So I would
Mhm.
like, I mean, I feel like I kind of lost a sense of stuff like through the Mennonite stuff. I would just like would like to know a little bit of like my mom's history, honestly.
Yeah,
Well,
well,
so now I'm curious though, because a lot of people who went through, a lot of Jews who were persecuted and their families were unalived and stuff, they very much pretended to be another religion, and they would not tell their kids at all about their Jewish heritage.
Yeah.
I
My
wonder
mom
if
mentioned
your
that.
family,
She said
yeah.
to me that her mom, my grandmother, married an Irish man, so basically so that like she was like accepted, like she never felt accepted, I guess.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I wonder if that's like kind of what it is. Like I know that my mom, like I think that there was maybe a couple things that my mom learned, but like culturally, my grandmother didn't pass anything on. She kind of took on my grandfather's religion, was Protestant, and kind of adhered to that. And there was really no mention, like never nothing culturally was ever taught to my mother. She says that she went over to my great grandfather's house a few times, and they would celebrate, and she learned things that way. But it was when she was younger, and there wasn't much that she's learned.
Yeah.
Wow. That's fascinating. Now you got me so curious about your
Yeah,
family
and it's
history.
funny
I
how it happened.
wonder.
I just got to thinking because I was it's really stupid, but I was on TikTok last night and somebody was kind of preaching Judaism as a religion. They were Jewish, and I was like, I don't want to hear it. Like I don't care any religion, like I don't want to hear it and all of that stuff. And then they reported me. And then I was like,
Oh,
wait a minute. And then I got to thinking, I was like, you know what? My mom, like, I would never. My mom was Jewish. And then I'm like, wait a minute. Does that make me? And it just like clicked. And so I grabbed some documents that I had, and I grabbed like my birth certificate and some like family stuff. And I started looking, and then I Googled, and then come to find out, like, I guess technically I am.
wow. That's really cool.
Yeah, and I never
That's
knew
really
because
cool.
I've heard it been passed on to the mom from the mom
Hmm.
side, but I didn't know that's how it worked. Like I assumed my mom was because my grandmother was, but I didn't know that that my mom, like I guess I thought that I wasn't because my grandmother married an Irish man and my mom married a Mennonite, so that would make me not Jewish. But I guess it doesn't matter as long as it's on the maternal mom side.
Yeah.
Well, so ethnically, I think you're Jewish if either of your parents are Jewish, but I think religiously, it's if your mom is Jewish.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
it's
Okay.
fascinating that technically you'd probably be accepted into the religious community without having to go through the conversion
Yeah, and
process.
it's not really
Let's
anything
say
that I
here.
want.
Right.
I don't want
No, I
that.
know.
Yeah.
I wouldn't suggest it, but it's just interesting.
It's so weird.
That's
Judaism can
really
be bad
cool.
for your
Wait,
health.
when did you find that out
Well, I like kind of put two and two together last night when that was happening, and I started
though?
questioning, like, oh, I don't know why she would say going against the religion isn't anti-Semitic. I didn't go against her, and then the thought crossed was like, my mother was Jewish. I would never, like, be rude towards an ethnic group. But it was just about the religion. I don't agree with religion, and then I was like. And then I was like, so then I like grabbed, I have some stuff in Hebrew and some, I have some writings and some letters and some things about my family. And I started looking at it, and then I Googled it, and then I came across the fact that if my mother is, then I am. And then I Googled my great grandfather's name because I know that my mom had mentioned that he was part of this like Jewish historical museum. And I actually visited when we went to Ireland when I was really young, and I was like, and so I looked it up, and his name is like in there on the website, and there's like a bunch of information about him.
No.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow,
Cool.
that's
pretty
super
cool. It
cool.
was just this weird thing that happened. It just made me thinking, like, just that person reporting me. I'm like, I would never, like, and like it made me like, I guess I got upset because I'm like, just going against a religion isn't anti-Semitic, and I was like, my mom is Jewish, and then I was like, wait a minute, and then I just started putting two to two together.
Yeah. Yeah. And also that, like, that always bothers me when people say, like, going against any religion is hateful towards the religion. That's not true at all. Like, at all. When people argue
Yeah, I mean,
against
I upset her,
religion,
and it
it's
was really
not.
funny too because I've come across her before in the live, and what she said to me was exactly what she was reporting to me. She's like, "Well, I think Mennonites are really horrible to their women," and I'm like, "Well, I
Oh,
agree."
God.
Right. And then I was like, I don't. And then some guy said, Happy Hanukkah, everyone. And I said, please don't. You're like in an atheist live. I don't want to hear any, like, I'm not telling you Merry Christmas. Like, and then that's when I got reported.
Sure.
Wow. Wow.
Some people are
Wow, that's
really
crazy.
petty.
But
Yeah.
yeah. It's interesting. By the way, side note, it's not even Hanukkah, but it's interesting that
That's even more ridiculous now.
yeah, I mean
Tomorrow.
it starts in 2 days, but it's interesting that he said that now. But yeah, that's crazy. See, I knew we had a connection.
Yeah.
Although I don't really identify with Judaism as a religion or necessarily an ethnicity either, but it's interesting.
Let's face it,
Yeah.
Israel would be a much nicer place if no Jews lived in it.
That's horrible.
I'm joking. I've got Israeli
But I had to
citizenship.
share that. I thought that was like interesting, and I just kind of clicked, I guess, last night, and I like stayed up late, like researching a bunch of stuff, and I found it like it's cool. It's nice to know like your heritage and like where you come from, essentially. But I found that to be very interesting.
Yeah, I do wonder though, like now your family history, like did they ever raise anti-Semitic? Oh, raise very anti-Semitic. I do wonder though, now like your family history, like did they choose to like convert to go to Christianity like on their own, or were they forced into it? Kind of tying back to what we were talking about before. Because some Jews went to it on their own, like obviously as people switch religions all the time, but some people were forced into it, especially when they don't want to talk about their Jewish ancestry. It's because they were forced into another religion. So I do wonder like how they came to be.
Yeah, yeah, and I would really like that. I know that my great grandfather, like from I'm diving into it, but when he came to Ireland, was very much from what I gathered, Googling stuff was very much coincides that he may have come because of the Holocaust.
Oh, he came back. He came in the like 40s.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah, so
Interesting.
I don't know
Oh,
for sure. I can't say because I don't know where he specifically came from or anything before that. I don't have that yet. I'm going to definitely deep dive into it and try to find out. But that's all
right.
I know is like he came to Ireland and I think it was 1943.
Oh, wait, he came to Ireland in 1943. Where, oh, you don't know where he came from, though. Oh, I thought you
Yeah.
said he came from Ireland to the States in 43.
No, no,
Oh,
no,
so
no.
he,
They're all my mom was born in Ireland. It's a long story, but her and my dad
oh,
met and then she like I don't know, like my dad left the community for a while. It's a whole long story. Met my mom, they got married and then he came to the United States and decided to join the community and that was a whole huge thing. They accepted her and accepted him, which is very rare to even get married into it. And I think it had a lot to do with like the family that my dad came from. I always wonder though, like why my mom, like not being raised in the Mennonite community, would choose and be okay with such an extreme life. Like that always like made me wonder, and
mhm.
it's not anything that I really questioned, but like why would you choose that?
Right. Well, I've wondered that about my mom as well because she went from Sephardi, which is like she was religious but not extreme, to Hasidic, which is majorly extreme. Like she chose to be in there. And like it always made me wonder also, like, why would you choose to go to such an extreme lifestyle like that? Like, I don't know either where that comes
Yeah, and my
from.
mom was never, I mean, the thing too is I always knew that my mom was married into it because it was, even though my dad was very much a big part of the Mennonite community. And my mom, it was like she never quite, like, it was almost like I had this feeling she was never quite accepted. And I remember like, she was never like with the other women when they would fellowship and stuff. My mom was very much like an outsider. And it was very much like she wasn't quite accepted because she wasn't born in the community. And I knew that. I knew that. I mean, it must have been very apparent because I knew that like at 8 or 9 years old, I knew this. You know what I mean? So I always just wonder why choose something like that and choose to say, even when you're never really truly considered to be a deep part of it because you weren't born into it.
Right. Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Wait, so with Mennonites, you can't you don't really convert into it? Like you can't
No,
it's
no, it's a culture. Yeah. So we like, I mean, we speak Plague Dutch, which is we came from, especially the Brethren, we came from a very specific part of Germany and Norway. And then they settled into the Pacific Northwest in the late 1800s. And in our community, you can't just join the Mennonite Brethren. We don't convert. We're very much separated. You are born into it or adopted into it. And it's very rare that you are married into it. Usually, like sometimes like Amish or some Anabaptists will go outside of the Brethren community. Even that is rare. But for my mom to not be born a Mennonite and to be married in the Mennonite community is very rare.
Interesting. So can I ask what their belief is? Let's say, because they believe, right, there's a whole bunch of stuff that you have to do to go to heaven. So what do they believe about people who aren't Mennonite? Can they, let's say,
So
still go to heaven or
yeah.
something?
So they believe that like once you're like the big separation is that once you've been a part of the English world, that there's no like that at that point you've been so influenced that you can corrupt other people in the community. And so that's why it's so rare to and it's very much, like I said, a culture. So they want you to be born into it. It's like I don't know why they do that. The only thing that I've ever really answered, I got onto it, is that when you are raised or lived a life in the English world, like essentially there's no coming back from it. You have an influence, and being in the community can make it very dangerous for everybody else.
So do they believe that people in the English world could, let's say, go to heaven or something like that? Or are they all doomed to hell?
Yeah, so essentially essentially they are doomed to hell. That they believe that when God judges you, it's not just about accepting your life. He's going to judge you based on the life that you've lived. And when you've been influenced by the English world, you've opened up yourself to like basically being full of sin that you can never redeem from.
Interesting. So you're either born into a lifestyle where you're going to heaven or you're doomed from birth. Like basically, before you're born into the world, it's decided whether you're going to heaven or hell, because either you're born into the
And
Mennonite
if you
community or you're
ask one
not.
of them, they will give you kind of a convoluted answer. So they'll say like, well, it's up to God to judge, but he does, want us to live like this sort of lifestyle. So they won't tell you directly that that's the case, but it essentially, I
Right.
would say yes.
Interesting. And then, do they have something? Because I know the Amish have Rumspringa, which is a year where where they have the ability to go into the English world. Do they have something similar to that, or not really?
No, I wish, but like, yeah. So we didn't. I think that there are some. Like I've met a couple people from different sort of Mennonite communities that have said that they have something similar. In our community, it's just really just not an option. No, you don't do that.
See, so I kind of, at the beginning, when I first heard about it, I was like, oh, I wish we had something like that. And then after, I'm like, I'm actually kind of glad we did it, because I could see it being used as a tool for manipulation. Because if you decide to leave after your year of Rumspringa, you're cut off from your family, you're shunned, everything. But if you decide to come back and then decide to leave when you're older and you've lived more, it's basically can be used above your head, like, hey, you had the choice to leave, but you didn't, you chose to stay. So like it can be kind of used as to kind of keep you in, because they tell you like, oh, you already had the chance to leave, that chance passed already, like you can't do that now. Which is interesting. I would love to talk to someone, because I told you I have a friend who left the Mennonite community, but I'd love to talk to someone who left the Amish community, who went through Rumspringa and then stayed and then left after.
See, I don't Misfit.
Yeah.
Misfit Amish, she left the community, but like, see, it's from what I've learned living in the Mennonite community, because we learn a lot about Amish, because we're very like we congregate as like, there's been very many times that we've gone to like some sort of like event and stuff, and there's been New World Amish people there and that sort of thing. So we're very much connect to each other. And from what I understand, because the Rumspringa is very different depending on it. Some of the Amish communities don't have it, or they used to have it and they don't have it anymore. And then some of them, it's very different. Like what I understand Mary went through is that like so essentially what it is when you become an adult and it's before you get baptized and you commit yourself to the church, you know, it's going to be a choice. But her Rumspringer, like she wasn't actually allowed to go outside of the English world and experience like things that way. She was just
Mhm.
kind of like on the fence, and they would have like dances and certain events in the Amish community, but they were never part of the English world. It was like very different. It was almost like their period of like kind of like becoming themselves and kind of courting. It was more used for courting than it was for actual anything else.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, wait. So they stayed within the community, but like they didn't, let's say there were parties or stuff like that, and it was
Yeah, and there
used
was
for
no
courting,
drinking or
but it was
anything. They would just do things like play volleyball and like and just like kind of intermingle as like usually how it's not allowed, how like men and women are not usually allowed to do that. And it was like from what I understand, what I've heard from Mary and from another Amish person, it was almost like just courting. Like they were just kind of courting like more than anything else.
interesting, interesting. And then I guess how did I guess the shoot, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess the courting thing go in the Mennonite community. Were there matchmakers? Were there, you got to kind of, did you get to date around? Like, how did that work?
Yeah, so it is complicated. It just depends on your family and what your father wants for you. So basically like in our community, like if a guy was interested, they would tell your father, and the father would either approve or disapprove, and then you would basically like he would like come to your house and you would maybe make him a meal and everybody would be present there, and then you would just kind of the courtship would be very minimal, and then at that point he would have to come to a decision, and if he didn't, then you'd move on. And at that point you would have kind of a choice. Like your father would be like, do you want this guy, or that sort of stuff. So there would
Mhm.
be a say into it. I did that a little bit. I was very not interested, and at that point, I didn't know I was autistic then, but at that point there was some concerns, I guess. I don't really know, but my father decided, and it's really funny because he said this as a choice, but it really wasn't. He had decided at that point that he was going to have an arranged marriage for me. Asked my permission for it, and of course I said yes. It really wasn't an option, and I was in an arranged marriage. I was 16
Wow.
and I married a man that was 24.
Wow.
Yeah, and it is
Wow.
legal in the state of Oregon because of my parental's consent. And technically, it's not considered to, in the eyes of the law, to be an arranged marriage because I consented to it.
Yeah.
Wow. And and is it like the norm? Because I know school stops at a certain point, right?
Yeah,
The eighth grade you mentioned before.
yes, yeah,
So is it the norm at that around 16 for people to get married? Like what is the
yes.
normal age? Like what do you do after eighth grade?
Yeah, so at that point I was like 12 when my education stopped, about 12 years old. And then I start learning like skills that my mom gives me. So I start really learning how to sew and to mend and to cook, and I'm basically learning how to be a wife. And then about 16 is generally when the courting. It does really depends on what your father wants and your family. But and it just really depends on each individual family, but I would say it's safe to say that if you aren't married by 19, 20 years old, that's concerning.
Oh, so that's kind of ish similar where in the Jewish community it's really up to like 23 years old in the Hasidic community. That's when you're like considered an old maid. But we do finish high school and stuff like that. But also it's different. We don't really have a courting process. It's more like everybody writes resumes when they're of marriageable age, and the resume has like references and stuff like that, the schools you go to, the rabbis you go to, the teachers you had, family, friends, and stuff like that. The resumes go to a matchmaker, and the matchmaker kind of exchanges resumes between family. Each family does research on that person, and then once the parents are done doing research, they usually allow the kids to do some of their own research as well. And if they both agree, they'll meet in the matchmaker's house. The couple will go to the kitchen, have a conversation there while the parents and the matchmaker are in the living room. And they'll usually come out of that one conversation engaged. Sometimes it's two conversations, but most of the time it's one conversation, and they'll come out engaged.
That's crazy. To me, that's basically an arranged marriage.
Yeah, basically, like they do research and stuff, but yeah, it's basically an arranged marriage. Yeah, ish. Yeah, it's a very similar concept. Yeah, and then though the less religious they are, they go on more dates. Like when my sister was dating, she was in the Orthodox community at that point. She would have dated someone for like 2-3 weeks, going to restaurants and stuff like that, and then deciding if she wants to get married or not. But they have the same process of doing research on that person and having
That's
a
very
resume exchange.
interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. That's why I like hearing about these different experiences, because a lot of the things overlap and then there's like slight differences. But I can't imagine, like, I feel like when I went to college, I was so behind everyone else because of the type of education I got. But I did have a high school education. So I wonder, like, I don't know if you have gone to college, but if you would try to go to
I
college or
did.
anything like that, it would be so much harder. Like,
Yeah, so I actually I think there's some things that I feel like I'm very fortunate of, but then not the same thing I'm very mad about because I feel like I was extremely hindered. So I found out later that when I left the English world that I was autistic, and I'm very brilliant with math and some other things, and so I got very fortunate, and I like took my SATs and I challenged the board and I went to OSU. I was accepted to OSU. I was very fortunate. It was very challenging for me because I've never been in like a structure like that or around people. It was very hard, and there was a lot of things like even though I was very good at math, and then essentially I did organic chemistry and essentially got very good at chemistry. There was a lot of things that I was struggling with. Like I really almost failed. Like here I am doing like calculus and advanced math, and I'm almost failing my English class.
mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was completely crazy. But yeah, I got very fortunate. But like in the Mennonite community, in the community that I grew up, like it is you don't go to college. That is unheard of. That is
Right.
something that would never, ever, ever, ever happen. You don't go to college. Like you get your I guess eighth grade education and you get married and that's it. And when the it's the
Wow.
same for the men, their education stops, but they're not really I wouldn't say it's I find it to be strange because we were very much geared on how to be wives. That's how our community is. We're very submissive. We're meet greet to our husbands, but the men weren't necessarily taught. Like they didn't have training on how to be a good husband. What they learned at that point was to work and learn a trade to support their family. So there was very work. And it's usually whatever your father did, it was passed on to you. Like there's a lot of companies that are owned within the Mennonite communities, like roofing companies and that sort of thing. So like if your father had a roofing company, then you're going to learn that trade.
Interesting, interesting. And then what about like sex? Because I know growing up, like we didn't learn about sex either. When a couple was engaged, they would have like these mentors that would teach them about sex or the rules of marriage. How did that work? Like, did you know it existed before you got engaged, before you got married? Like, when did you?
No, we didn't get correct anatomy. Like our sex education was
Wow.
this book called To the 11-Year-Old Me. And it talks about it's given to women and it's literally talked about to be careful about wearing nightgowns even in your home around your brother and father as you're going through puberty. It's very much taught that you need to be modest. There is nothing that's taught about how that sex works or anything like that. I knew when I get married that, how
Yeah.
it basically worked, but I didn't know anything else beyond that. And then it's the same thing once you're engaged. There is a woman in the community in leadership that will talk to me about like what my duty is and like basically how
Yeah.
sex works and what to expect on my wedding night. And that's pretty much discussed at that point. Same thing.
Wow. See, so that was always like, I'm so happy I didn't get married within the community but like it's so, especially growing up, learning to be so modest, and that you have to be in charge of making sure that men's eyes don't stray to you and that their thoughts stay pure and whatever. And then to go from that to being told like you have to have sex and this and that, it just seems like it can be so traumatic, especially when, because in a lot of religious communities, SA happens and it's swept into the rug and not really dealt with. So, like, especially for people who have gone through SA, I can't imagine how traumatic that experience has to be, because
And it was
you don't know
one
what
thing
you're
that was
going
really
into.
traumatic for me is like I was told, like when I got engaged by my mother and everything, they talked to you about like your duty as a wife. And so they don't tell you not to, but they basically tell you what can happen and like why you would want to do it. Like it doesn't come from a place, and what can happen if you basically, they tell you not to withhold sex from your husband. They basically tell you that.
Yeah.
And what it can lead to and what it could happen, that you are there to be your husband and your husband wants to show you his love, and that's how he shows you his love. So to deny him of that is denying him of love.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
but kind of similar. And especially like, so there are times like Friday nights, it's supposed to be like holier to have sex on Friday nights. So you're supposed to do it. But also like, oh, do you guys have something similar? Like, the week of the period and the week after a period, couples are not supposed to touch each other. Is there something, a similar concept, or not really?
Yeah, kind of. So you were, so not, kind of learned like what your guys' concept is, and it's definitely way different. But when we start a period, we do have to let our husbands know, and we are not to sleep in the same bed or anything like that. And we are supposed to be clean and sanitized about it and have no trace of it. Like our husband should never have any, like never see panties or anything like that. Like there should be no trace, and you're to be very clean. And you don't sleep in the same bed as your husband during the period. But once your period is over, like that's fine. And that's what we're taught. And that's it. Yeah.
Interesting. So in a lot of Jewish communities, the couples have like two twin beds that they either push together, or they just do it on a twin bed, or like two queen size beds. Did you have a similar thing, or
No,
did
we
you
had
just
our
sleep somewhere else? Like,
just like,
how'd that
yeah.
work?
So it depends on the family. Like we always, like most places, there's like a guest room, and that would be kind of like where I would sleep during that. And it would be up to my husband, but we didn't have two twins beds. We just had our bed in our room. And then during my period, essentially I would sleep in what would be considered the guest room.
What?
And then
Oh,
I would have to sanitize, like I would have to, and then afterwards I would, of course would have to sanitize the sheets and remake the bed and that sort of stuff. So
that's so demeaning, though. Like to have to
Yeah, why do you
go to
have
the
to go to
guest
the guest
room.
room?
What?
yeah, I don't know if
Exactly.
that's just how it was. It's not my
Why did
husband, it's
Gabriel have
me
to
that's
go?
having the period, not my husband. So I would be
Well,
the
that's
one that
not
would have to
fair.
leave the room. Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
That is so demeaning. Like I can't imagine, especially like personally, I get cramps. Like I would not be okay with that's also another reason. Like I'm happy I never got married within there, because like physical touch is one of my love languages. Like I would want hugs, and I would not like if I felt like shunned off to the bedroom. Like I would not be happy. I'd probably shut down emotionally, honestly.
Yeah, that's difficult.
Yeah.
I never had that
Well,
relationship
thanks
with
for
my
having
husband.
me.
I mean, he eventually, I won't go into it, but anyways, he's the last year of our marriage. I kind of knew what was going on with him. He ended up unaliving himself. He's gay. And
Oh, wow.
that's a whole nother story, but that's the reason I left the community. And I'm not, and it was very awful because he unalived himself. He wasn't allowed to be buried, in the cemetery. And there was no, ceremony, and I was not allowed to grieve for it. I was questioning things before then, but that was the final straw. And I made a date. And then when that date happened, I packed up my shit and I walked the 5 miles to the payphone, and that was it. I was
Oh,
done. but that was the tipping point that made me leave. But before, like, I knew any of that, and we eventually became best friends, and none of us really wanted it. But I did not want to be in that marriage. He was 24 years old. I very much didn't want it. I felt like I had to. I never had any sort of like romantic feelings for him. I was, if anything, for the first couple years, I was very resentful. Like I almost hated him at some point. I did not want that.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, that must be so hard. Like, I can't even imagine. Like, the Jews have something similar where they're not supposed to bury people if they commit suicide, if they unalive themselves, but they end up doing it because they say, like, in the last seconds, they may have regretted it or something like that. But I can't imagine, like, your spouse unaliving himself and then not being able to mourn him, not being able to bury him, not like none of that, and especially because he was gay, because he was queer. Like, I
Nobody ever came
that
out and said
that
that,
sucks.
and they knew
Wow.
that. I knew that about him, and he battled that. And I, there's so many things I regret. I wish I would have been like, hey, I almost get emotional about it. Sorry. I wish I would have been like, hey, let's just get out of here. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to handle it. Like I knew this, and like he was battling it, but I didn't know, like, in the community, I didn't know how to handle it. Like I didn't. There's so many things that I regret. I wish I would have like pushed him and been like, let's leave, and he would have never unalived himself. Like I hold a lot of guilt for that, to be honest.
So I'll give you this. Like, uh, honestly, you did not know better. You didn't know the other options at that point. Like, you did not know what was there, what was not. Like, okay, we're very few people on here. I can get like kind of personal, but when my dad passed, he OD'd, my mom's reaction right away was, okay, let's go get our nails done. Let's go get a waxing because we won't be able to during Shiva. Because he was an addict, like, it was very much that disconnect. After I got older, I'm like, there's so much I could have done. Like, he was only on drugs and stuff like that because we were pushing him away, and we weren't really there, and we kind of pushed him to the point. Um, but you can't really have that. That is not your responsibility because you were also a victim of the community, of the cult, of the culture, and you didn't even know that leaving was an option. Like you lost your entire family, and you were to do this all for someone that you weren't even truly attracted to. Like, I don't know that I would put that on you at all. Like,
It's something
that
that
sounds
I
like
have to
you
get
did
over.
everything you could.
And I feel a
Yeah.
lot of guilt for his unaliving is what saved me from the community. Essentially, that was the pushing point, and everything that went along with it. That was like, okay, do I really want, like, I didn't want my kids in that anymore. Like, I felt like it was essential for them. I just knew that it was messed up. That was a thing, like all the things that happened and how I was treated and all that stuff. And I feel guilt for that because it's like him dying saved me. Like, that's effed up.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, but that's the truth though. Like, sometimes it sucks, but sometimes you need that, like, moment, like something to shake you and be like,
Yeah.
I can't, or else I'm gonna end up unaliving myself too. Like, I think if I would have stayed within the community, I would have ended up unaliving myself at some point
I think
because
that I would
you
have
just
too.
can't live like that. You can't live with that level of control. Like, especially, yeah,
And I
yeah. No,
didn't want
there's a lot
the
going
kids.
into it. Yeah.
Like, I was just like, it made me look at things and realize the life that my kids would have, and I didn't want that for them.
Yeah, yeah. And like, that's one thing I kind of still struggle with because I know if I was religious, my sister, she's 11 years old. She's in that community, and I have no contact with her. I've seen her twice in the past 5 years, but we used to be super close. Like, I have done and will still try to do anything for her. So I've tried to go back to being religious and stuff like that because I know if I was religious, I'd be able to have a relationship with her. But every time I've tried, it just messed up my mental health so bad because and I realized I won't be here for when she turns 18 if she decides to leave. If I stay religious, I wouldn't be here in her life. She wouldn't have it like someone to go to.
Yeah,
So like sometimes you
especially
got
when
to
you
do
get
what's
out of
best for
it and
you.
you realize that
Mhm.
like that was misery and life is so much better, and you have like you aren't just like a lower class citizen, because that's what basically women are in the Mennonite community. To put myself back into that, I wouldn't be able to handle it. There's no way, because I know that there's a better life. There's a better way.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. 100%. Wow. You're like bringing up you're making me emotional and stuff
It's okay.
thinking
I was
about
getting
my
kind of emotional.
siblings.
It's hard for me to, I talk about it, but it's hard for me. There's a lot of, dude, it
Yeah.
sucks too, because when I really think about it, like from day to day, I seem like okay and like, oh, that's something that happened to me, and like it is what it is, and my life is so much better. But when I really start talking about it, I realize that I still have so much anger and hurt about it. Like it really, I am very angry and still very much affected.
Yeah. Yeah. Like kind of similar. Like day to day, I'm pretty good talking about it and touching on these stuff and whatever. But I don't know if it's anger, but it's more like I'm trying to explain that feeling. It's like more like anguish, like the fact that my sister is going through that now and I don't have contact with her, and like all of this stuff is happening, and like her life could be messed up or stuff like that. And I feel like I'm not doing enough because like if I was stronger, I could stay religious. I could pretend to be religious until she turns 18, then have a relationship with her. So it's more self-directed, but yeah, I completely get where you're coming from. Yeah,
Yeah, and that's not
it's hard.
true, just so you know, because like if you're religious and she wants to get out and you're in the community, is she really going to feel safe going to you? Do you know what I mean? Like now you can provide her like a place to go, and like you can provide her like, like something outside of that.
Well, at this point, yeah, because if she knew I went through not being religious for years and then I was in her life again because I was religious, like I feel like she would feel like this is a conversation I have with myself all the time because I would do anything for her. Like I've been trying to
That's so
have a
heartbreaking.
relationship with her for years. But yeah, honestly, if I was religious, I would be able to have a relationship with her. But then also if I was religious, I'd probably unalive myself again if I would go back into the community. So not again, because I haven't done it yet. But um it it's yeah. Yeah, it's kind of a weird situation. But yeah. Yeah, I guess we'll see. We'll see. I
I
mean,
think
I've
she'll come to it. I think that she'll probably get out of
I'm
it.
hoping. I'm hoping, but I do have a younger brother who is becoming a rabbi and who is like he cut off all contact as well. And we used to be super close as well. So like she could go in either direction. She's 11 now. So it really depends on when she gets older what she's feeling, but yeah, it's just hope. And I don't care if she stays religious. I just want her to be happy and want a relationship with her. And I don't think I'll
Yeah.
get one if she's still religious. That's where it goes to. Yeah.
That's so
Yeah. But,
unfortunate. I hate that about these kind of communities, that you're either in
mhm.
it or you're not in it, and you lose like it sucks. Like it's that cult mentality, like you lose everything.
Yeah. Yeah. You really do. Oh, how many siblings do you have? I have four siblings. Yeah, but it's really you lose everything, and that I think also like we've touched on this before a little bit with Ray. Like I do have someone in my family who is a predator, who's a is a known P word, and people are like she's allowed to be around him no problem because he's still religious, but someone like me can't be around her because I'm not religious. It's just very
It's messed
it
up.
really frustrates me. Yeah, yeah, but it is what it is. But
Yeah,
it sucks.
totally
Yeah,
messed up.
yeah, it's completely messed up. But that's what happens when people are so extreme, they end up tying religion and your level of religiousness to your character and to what kind of morals you have, when
Yeah.
that's not how life works, you know? Yeah.
It is so messed up too, because like, dude, I don't understand that. Like, I guess I understood it. What that I was at that mentality that I thought that, and now that I realize it's different, it's so messed up. Like, I don't get it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Like, yeah, struggling with it. Um, shoot, I'm getting emotional. I'm like, I might just turn this off.
Sorry, I didn't
Because
mean
Oh,
to
I
make
gotta.
you
No,
feel
no, no, no,
emotional.
no,
I
no, no,
mean,
no, 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 no. It's. I always get emotional talking about it. But it's okay. I need a good cry.
it's tough
But
though. It's tough because
what?
there's certain communities
Mm-hmm.
within Judaism, certain communities that even if you still keep the Sabbath and you're still like semi-observant, they still cut you off. But if one of your
Mm-hmm.
family members passes away, you're not allowed to actually go to the funeral and mourn.
Yeah, I had
And
that
and
happen
that's
with my
yeah,
grandmother on my
and
dad's
that
side. I actually didn't even know she had passed till 3 months after she had passed.
yeah.
Wow.
And that
Yeah.
denies the
Wow.
person the right, because it's a mitzvah to it's a mitzvah. It's oh, what's the English word for it? A reward. It's a good
A
thing,
good deed, a
a good
commandment.
deed, and for an individual to be able to go and mourn a loved one and follow the laws of mourning, but you're denying that person doing that
Yeah.
under the name of a version of Judaism. It's it's terrible. It's shocking.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, one second. I'm taking a
I
bite.
am
Yeah.
weeb. So yeah, Anabaptist is kind of like I guess the umbrella term for it. It was Mennonite, conservative Mennonite, Mennonite Brethren to be specific. So under the Anabaptist, if you're Anabaptist, you're either Amish or Mennonite.
Yeah.
That's the Anabaptist religion, and there's so many like denominations and stuff around it. Like it's confusing, but yes, Anabaptist, which is I guess kind of the general term for it.
Have
Interesting.
you followed do you follow Deirdre or anyone here follow Eli, the former Amish guy on TikTok? He's got
Yeah, I
a
have a
big
No.
hard time
page
with
and
that guy.
well
To be
I
honest,
see.
a lot of things that he says are he speaks for the Amish, and he even speaks. He was Amish, but he speaks for the Mennonite woman in a way that's incorrect. Um,
Right.
and he
Funny.
says things that are incorrect. It's a big thing, and him speaking for women, the position that a man has in the Amish and Mennonite communities is very different. So it's easy for him to say that he's not oppressed that way, but then he'll generalize it and say that women aren't when that's incorrect. And then some of
Right.
the stories are concerning to me because they don't kind of align up with what reality is.
Right.
So,
I'm with
so
you.
I've
It's
never,
good to
I've
get
never
an
heard of this.
outside.
But what do you mean that he says stuff that's incorrect, or he speaks for women? Like, I've never heard of him before. But in what way does he do that?
One way that he was saying that it is that women are he'll talk about like that women he'll make it like women are as oppressed that they want. He's even said that women have like a choice on who they marry in the communities, which is really not
Mm.
true. Like if you don't find it even if you do have the ability to court, like everything is approved by your parents. He also likes to kind of diminish the oppression that the women face. He makes it sound like they are that in some ways that our roles are different, but they're very equal, and that's not the case at all. In the Anabaptist community, like we're not allowed to like participate in the Bible studies and that sort of thing. And we're
Yeah.
very much meet greets for the husband. So he definitely like he makes it sound better than it is. And then some
That's
of the stories that
interesting.
he says are very
Yeah.
just inaccurate. And then I also find it disturbing. Like I will say that I know that there's some similarities with the Amish community, but I would never take an Amish story and put it in my story. And he takes the
Hmm.
conservative Mennonite Mennonite stories, and he
Yeah.
lumps them in with the Amish stories, and that's wrong.
I'm with you. It's good to get an
Interesting.
inside opinion of that, because I obviously have no background apart from watching a couple of documentaries on National Geographic about the Amish mafia and all of these sorts of things. So it's quite interesting to hear your take on that. I think there's a program called Amish Mafia. It's absolutely brilliant, but I think it's actually more Mennonite than Amish.
Yeah, and that's so frustrating. That's what frustrates me.
Yeah.
Like I've spoke a lot that, but for the really ultra conservative Mennonites, like the Mennonite Brethren, and there's some other groups of it. We don't fit quite with the typical Mennonite, and we're so conservative in our ways that they take our stories and they lump them in with the Amish, and it
I'm with
happens
you.
all the times. Like I've never watched any documentary or any show that I've ever watched. There's always Mennonites within that, and there's it drives me crazy. There's just that's what I'm trying to change. I don't feel like there's a place for us.
Mm. I think
That's
he tries
interesting.
to talk on behalf of. Sorry, Faye.
No.
Yeah.
I was just saying that's really interesting that it's that way.
Yeah,
That they
you
lump
should
them
check him
together.
out,
Yeah.
Faye. I mean, I don't know if it's of any interest to you, but I think he
No,
comes
probably.
from what he considers old world Amish.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think what he's doing is kind of like trying to be a spokesman for all Mennonite and speaking on their
And
behalf when he's.
And he has no idea. Like he
Yeah,
and Pennsylvania Old World Amish and Mennonite Brethren in the Pacific Northwest is so entirely different. He's
got
never
you.
been in that community. He doesn't know what it's like. And for him to speak on behalf of the community that he was never a part of, like he was never a Mennonite, he was a New World Order Amish. He should not be
Yeah,
speaking on us.
yeah, I've got you.
Wow, interesting. I don't even know if I should check this guy out now because you're saying that he's saying stuff wrong.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
Um,
he's a born again Christian. He said his mum allows him to visit only twice a year, but he kind of sneaks in visits in between, and his wife and himself and his son dress up in Amish clothing in order to be accepted in the household. Various things.
It doesn't make any
in-
sense. That concept doesn't make sense either
Well, it didn't
because
make sense to me,
it's
that
not.
part, to
It
be
seems
honest.
very fake, and I don't know I mean, I don't really know. Like, I don't want to say what is or isn't fake, but that doesn't align with the Anabaptist shunning and what that entails.
Yeah.
And the fact that if he's in that community, because he's taken pictures and videos and everything like
Mm,
that when he's
yeah,
inside the community, and that is like spitting in their face. That
yeah,
is the most disrespectful thing, and goes against like that's not allowed. Like you're not allowed to get pictures of yourself, let alone have videos in that community. They literally think that that's of the devil, so how could he be doing that?
yeah. No, I got
Interesting.
you.
Wait. One second, just to get this straight. So he says that he still can visit his family twice a year, but he has to dress up in Amish clothes, which I think you're right. Like I've never went. Obviously, I'm not educated enough on the Amish culture or the Mennonite culture or anything like that. But from what I understood, when it's shunning, you can't have contact with them.
Yeah.
Correct.
So it's interesting that he can still visit his family twice a year, but even more so, like that's the one thing, videos and pictures, even I know, like you are not supposed to at
No,
all.
absolutely not. And that doesn't make sense
Yeah.
to me. There's just some things that don't quite make sense.
They don't add up, yeah. Because he does say I think he says he comes from 11 or 12 of them, and his father
Mhm.
was actually shunned by the bishop because he was an alcoholic who sadly passed away, and his father was a bit of a rebel. So I think he only talks to one or two of his brothers. All of his sisters, he claims, have shunned him. And his mum, I would believe, would be one of the ones that would shun him, but he says she allows him to visit once or twice a year. In fact, if
So,
it was up to her, it would only be once a year.
but
So
that
I
doesn't
don't
even
know.
make
Maybe
sense
that's
because
just
if it
his
was up
family.
to the
Yeah.
community, And the thing
Yeah.
is even if the community, the bishop tells you that you can have these contacts twice a year, it wouldn't be in the community. I don't know. I'm not going to speak for Amish,
Yeah,
but in
yeah.
our community, let's say that that was allowed, that somehow it was decided that they could celebrate Christmas or see me once a year. I wouldn't be allowed in the community. There would have to be a neutral point where
Got
we
you.
met
Yeah.
up. There would be no way that I would be allowed into the community.
That
And it's
would make
disrespectful
sense.
if you're not of the English, if you're of the English world, to put on the plain dress is a sign of disrespect.
Yeah.
Oh, wait. But what if you like if you would go visit your family or something like that, or family that was still within the Mennonite community, they wouldn't it would be disrespectful if you would wear that
They would
clothes? Because
not
I
have me
know,
dress plain. Yeah, that's disrespectful. That
Yeah. And he
I'm of the
says his
English
mum
world. To be
insists
wearing
upon it,
plain
though.
dress it
Yeah.
would be extremely disrespectful.
That's interesting.
in
Because he claims that his mother insists upon it, that she won't entertain him if he's wearing English clothes.
See, that kind of just goes against, because it's
Yeah.
if you are of the English world, you've made that decision, and to put on that plain dress that is very much incorporates the community and the religion and the followings, it's disrespectful. Like, you wouldn't be. That's not, yeah, that's not, I don't see how. And like I said, I'm not Amish, I'm not New World Amish. Maybe his community is different than they operate, but in my community, me wearing a, if I wouldn't be allowed in the community, but let's say something happened, a funeral or something happened, and they said I could, for me to wear my plain dress would be
Yeah.
so disrespectful to do that. They would not allow that because I am
Yeah.
of the English world now.
I've got you.
So I have a question. If you would, let's say something would happen and you would be able to see them, whatever, even if you can't wear the dress that you would wear within the Mennonite community, would you be expected to still dress modest, like cover, I don't know what the,
Yeah,
like in
so I would be
Judaism,
asked to
women have
dress
to cover their
modestly.
elbows. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd be
Oh,
asked to wear it modestly, and that would probably, like, I'd probably wear, like, not tight fitting jeans and maybe like a baggy sweater. But to wear a plain dress and to wear a bonnet would be extremely disrespectful. They would not allow me to do that.
wow. Wow, that's so interesting because it like if I were to visit my family, I would be expected to dress in how they told me to dress, like in the modest way with the skirt and everything covering my knees, my elbows, everything
Yeah.
Well,
because
our
they
dressing, the
see
way
that
that we
as
dress is it shows our
yeah.
commitment to Christ and to our community and our religion. So if you don't have that commitment, you don't wear that clothing.
Interesting. That's fascinating. Oh, Jasper, no, I have makeup on. Don't lick my face. Sorry. Um, that's really interesting. So I wonder then what like who he's visiting. Like, do you think his mother's maybe also out of the community, but she still like okay? The only thing that I could kind of compare it to is I think it's called Breaking Amish, that show. So the woman Mary, the mother, I
Yeah.
think that's her name. So she's out of the community, but she still dresses and stuff like that. So do you think it's kind of similar where his mother's out of the community but still follows the rules and stuff?
No, according to him, she's still in it, and very much so. And he has taken photographs. I don't think she's ever known
The
that he's taken
photographs is what
photographs.
kills me.
Yeah, yeah, he's taken photographs of the back of her, or if she's in the kitchen preparing them something. But she has told him that whenever he does visit, he must park his car away from the community so that any of the buggies that pass won't notice that he's there.
So maybe she's seeing him in secret, or like the community doesn't approve. But the photographs and the videos, that I think is very disrespectful because that's something they believe. Really, Jasper? That's my mirror. Drop it. Sorry.
It's like walking into a Jewish house with a bacon sandwich.
Drop it. Yeah, it's like walking into the thing with the bacon sandwich. Yeah. Here, Jasper, come
You know,
here. I got
into an observant Jewish home with something that is against the lacks respect.
Okay. Yeah. You are gonna choke on that. Sorry, one second. My dog is putting plastic in his mouth, and he is going to choke if he keeps doing that. Come here. Sit. Wait. Drop it. Good boy. Okay. Sorry, I do not need to learn how to do CPR on a dog right now.
So, Deirdre,
Yes.
kennst du Deutsch gesprochen?
Yeah, Plit Dutch, not Pennsylvania Dutch.
Yeah, I was just
Yeah.
testing you.
Yeah. No, I speak Plit Dutch.
Yeah.
A lot of the Amish people in Pennsylvania speak Pennsylvania Dutch, but we speak
Got you.
Plit Dutch in our community, which is essentially Low German.
Right.
Yeah.
It's interesting. One second, Ray. How many languages do you know? Hi, Lebza. How are you? How many?
Fluently,
Let's say,
without messing about. Spanish, Hebrew, Russian, and a Yiddish type of German
Wow.
that I can walk
That's
around and I can order and I can talk to people, but not on a very high level of kind of like, that I can speak with Hebrew and English. I can speak about science and politics, but I can still, you drop me somewhere in any of these countries, then I just get about. I'll have no problem.
Wow. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Hey, Lebza. How you doing?
we speak a bit of Dutch variant language in South Africa as well.
Oh,
Ja,
yeah?
that's
Oh,
right.
really?
En Afrikaans. Kan je praten Afrikaans, ja?
Yes.
Hoe
Ja,
gaan het met jou?
ik kan Afrikaans praten. Goed idee.
Bij goed, dank je. Wat is jouw naam?
Mijn naam is Lebza.
Lebza. Good to see you, man.
Lebza.
I wish I knew
Yeah,
what you
sorry,
all just
dankie.
said.
Aan
Like,
gaan
I have
namakanis.
no idea what you said. The Dutch I
That was it.
understood because it's close enough to Yiddish, but I had no idea what you just said.
Yeah, because I was
Yeah,
talking to Iron Shark earlier on Discord, and I was saying, he's Italian, but he lives in the Netherlands, and I said, you know what? Forget learning Dutch, just learn Afrikaans because you can just get around with the easy grammar. It's easier.
Oh, really? Oh, Iron Shark is awesome, though. Oh, one second. We got somebody else.
So do you know, Ray, do you know any Plague Dutch?
No, but I have from just documentaries and things. I've tried to hear some of it to be able to kind of like contrast or kind of like hear the difference. So I've not heard full sentences.
Welcome back, Zeno.
Okay.
I wanted to ask Deirdre about the Baptist Brothers and the Fundamental Baptists. How are they similar? How are they similar to the Anabaptist?
Yeah, so it's very different than I think that it's getting confused. Anabaptist, the reason. Okay, I'll give you a little history here. So basically, what happened is the whole thing. They were all Mennonites at one point. They broke away from the Catholic Church. The leader of the Mennonite community, Simmons, I think, I forget. He basically the term Anabaptist came from is that he did not adhere to the belief that christening was okay, that there should be like an age of accountability, that baptism shouldn't be something that is done when you are a child, that it's something that should be done as an adult, and then that's essentially how it started. So the Anabaptist community, he kind of that's where the term comes from. He created his own community from that, which essentially formed into the Mennonites. And the Mennonites, because of that, were persecuted. They were being unalived and put into jail, into prison, and that sort of thing. So basically, what happened is that when America started becoming America, there was, I think it was 500 acres that were promised to the Mennonites in Pennsylvania. So they came to Pennsylvania, and then from that, there was the Amish group broke out. They weren't agreeing with the Mennonite traditions. They believed that there was more shunning that would needed to be done, and that they shouldn't be started adhering to things like electricity and that sort of stuff, that they needed to be more traditional. So when we first all came to America, it was Mennonite, and then from that broke off the Amish community. There was some Mennonites that stayed in that area in parts of Germany and Norway. That's essentially where I came from. That group, what happened is within those communities, the Brethren was formed. They felt like it wasn't being strict enough. They weren't adhering to strict guidelines, that there was rules that should be formed. And so it broke off and became Mennonite Brethren. And then from then, the Mennonite Brethren moved off and formed communities in Oregon, Washington, Canada, and Mexico. And there are still communities in Germany as well. If that kind of explains it. It's confusing.
But the fundamental Baptists are a bit crazy themselves.
Yeah, so the fundamentalist Baptist has nothing to do with Anabaptists.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying that I'm quite familiar with them and some of their preachings. They come across as a bit crazy.
The Baptists, yeah.
I have a question. Do people ever within, let's say, I know that you said there are a few different kind of Mennonite communities. Do people ever marry within those different Mennonite communities?
Yeah, so in the Brethren community, there is some ultra-conservative communities that some of the Holderman communities and different sort of ones that they will marry within those. We are more likely to marry within the Amish communities. If we're going to marry outside a community, the Brethren Mennonite is more likely to marry within the Amish community than they were in the more less conservative Mennonite communities.
Interesting. And then do you go with, I'm guessing you go with whatever the husband, the man is from, like you go with whatever his family does, like if it's Mennonite or Amish?
Correct. Yeah.
Interesting. I guess it's similar to like when people within different Hasidic groups marry each other, you go with whatever the man's family, wherever he comes
and then
from.
usually if that happens, it's usually an arranged marriage. I can't imagine, I don't know any situation where we had access enough to court within another community. I guess it just depends on where we live, but our communities where I come from, they're so isolated and so separated that I can't imagine going into another community, let alone having the ability to court somebody. The only ones I've ever learned was that it was an arranged at that point, that usually it's the daughter isn't able to find a husband or isn't fitting in with their potential suitors, and then they would have an arranged marriage outside of the community, and then she would leave that community and join that community.
Interesting. But wait, sorry. When it comes to marriages, is it always initiated by the guy, or do the parents get involved? Because you said the guy will go ask permission from the parents. So sometimes do the man's parents and the woman's parents, do they arrange it between each other? Or is it interesting?
Yeah, that can happen too. But as far as courtship goes, within my community, you can't, and it would be really bad and considered to be really disrespectful. Let's say there was a guy that was interested in me, and he showed interest in me and expressed that, and maybe had conversations with me and didn't speak to my father and ask permission. That would be very, very, very wrong.
Right. But it's interesting because that's that doesn't happen even. Men and women don't ever speak to each other. So the only way they get to know each other is kind of through their parents or through the matchmaker. It never
Yeah,
men
we
and
have
women like
ability to
going to
speak to each
synagogue.
other, never alone or
Yeah.
anything, but within church. And then we have community events so that we're able to speak to each other and kind of know who each other are. And a lot of us have grown up together as children. There is some separation, but it doesn't seem as strict as it is with you guys. But definitely, as far as like anything that would be romantic is considered to be would be borderline impure and sexual. So you could not flirt like if it came to that point, like there would be a separation if let's say we were having some sort of community like gathering and dinner and some sort of fellowship where children and men and everybody were interacting and a guy sat next to me and was paying attention to me, that would be very wrong. You could not do that. So even in those environments it's very controlled. Like you can't just be like focusing your attention on one person of the opposite sex.
Right. That's interesting. That's interesting. I'm in the hallway now, so I can't speak. So if somebody else wants to, I just don't want to speak out loud because kids are going to sleep. But yeah, that is fascinating.
I don't know what to say now.
Sorry. I'm just until I get outside because I'm walking my dog. And
Yeah, no, I understand. Yeah, no, I went
there's
into
no
pause,
elevator.
but
There's an elevator.
I thought Lebza was going to ask something else.
Okay, let me see. You know, the Christian
I
heritage
don't
of
know. Shoot.
I was saying
Are you?
the Christian heritage of the United States from the time of the Mayflower uh, Christian Christian pilgrimage who landed in that land. Is that something that is widely acknowledged in the U.S. that for America to be what it was, the greatest democracy and civil liberties and all the material success that the country has experienced, is that widely attributed to its Christian heritage?
I'm not really sure what you're asking. Do we? I mean, it's not like do we like that it was
It's
colonized? No, they don't like to admit that. But
No, I mean in terms of its success,
oh,
the
you're
Christian
asking how
heritage.
large the communities are? Like if it's largely accepted, like that?
No, look, for me, it comes across like America is by and large, regardless of the different Christian groups that are there, the the Baptists, the Southern Baptists, the Catholics, uh, even the Mormons and the Jehovah's Witness
I think I kind of get what
groups.
you're saying. So we have it's a constitutional right of freedom of religion.
Yes, I know that, but it seems like the United States, compared to Europe, has held on to religion, as it were, as part of the lifestyle over there.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I'm not. I'm trying to get what you're saying.
No, I'm just asking whether
Are
is
you?
it something that is acknowledged that for America to be what it is now, is that attributed to its Christian heritage? Is that
I
widely
think so.
attributed to
Like
its Christian heritage?
it's a it's a largely Christian country. I mean, if you look at all the presidents, they've been they've been Christian men. Like it, the U.S. is a largely Christian country,
But
even though they say freedom of religion.
the Thanksgiving holiday that you have over there, isn't it to celebrate the fact that there were Christian pilgrimage who came and founded the country? Isn't it based on that?
I mean, it's based on the unaliving of indigenous people, honestly.
Yeah, I think it's
But
awesome.
yeah,
I don't celebrate Thanksgiving. I don't even like get together and since I've been outside the English world, we don't celebrate Thanksgiving in the Mennonite community. I've heard that some of the Amish communities do, but the only holiday we really celebrate as far as celebrating is Christmas and Easter, and it's celebrated in a very different way than it is in the English world. Like in the Mennonite communities, we don't have any Santa Claus or anything like that. That's not something
Do
that
you
is
give
okay.
gifts? Do you give gifts and stuff?
Yeah, so we give gifts, but it's not the gifts aren't given. So like in America where they have gifts that are given individually to kids and that sort of thing, the gifts that are given are to the family. So it'll be something like that the whole family that would use that will improve I guess their household or anything. It's really common Christmas gifts and they're generally just given from family to family is like a
No, wait,
cast iron skillet would be something that you would receive on Christmas for
no,
the
no, 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 no.
family.
Sorry, 1 second. Sorry. There's a hole right here, so you got to stand here. There's a hole right here. He could slip through. But yeah, no problem. Sorry about that.
Do you celebrate
Yeah.
Easter as well? Do you celebrate Easter?
Yes, but Easter is not we don't we don't celebrate it like the English world celebrate it. Like that is crazy. Like when I was like came in the English world, I'm like, what is going on? So we don't do Easter bunny or like any of that stuff. Like we celebrate in a very different way. And really what it is we have like a whole entire day of church and worship.
Oh, so you don't have like Easter egg hunts or stuff like that?
No, nothing like that. No. That would be considered to be
Interesting.
that's very English, that's very worldly, and that is
Mhm.
considered that's kind of the reason with Christmas, with gifts, there's a reason why people don't we get gifts as a family, like one family will bless another family, um, to give gifts, but it would be considered to be very you're not supposed to be like you need to be humble. It would be considered to be very selfish and very worldly to get a individual gift like that. That is not something that is okay. You're not supposed to celebrate yourself like that.
Interesting. Because like the one thing about Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever is like the gifts. I loved that. Would love so like we got 8 days of gifts and I loved it. But I don't know. I think gift giving is a nice thing. You also think about other people when you don't just receive gifts. You give it. You think about other people. But yeah, well,
Yeah,
that's
I mean, it's
interesting.
still exciting in our Mennonite community, maybe because we just don't know any better. But I mean, it's still very cool to see what you get and to get a gift for the family. And it just depends on what it is. Sometimes it will just it'll be
Just
I don't know,
yeah.
just different things. Like I always joke about this because it's almost embarrassing. But one year for Christmas, our family got a goat.
Hmm. Oh wow.
Yeah, so it like like that's almost embarrassing. It's so old. Like what it almost like I don't know, like we got a goat. Like that seems just so like
But that's an expensive gift, though. I
And
would
that
say.
was yeah, and that was we were very blessed for that. We got a goat, and we had already had another goat, and we ended up. I mean, it ended up providing milk for us. Like we didn't do so it depends on the community, but we didn't do like we were pretty self sufficient as far as food sources go, and we didn't drink like cow's milk or anything like that. We drink
Hmm.
goat's milk and we everything that we could source or do for ourselves we did. We had rough winters where I lived, so we do a lot of canning, and then most of the
Hmm.
meat that we would have would be meat that we hunted ourselves. um,
Oh,
we never went out. Like it would be unheard of to go out and buy a packaged cow. Like that is ridiculous. um, yeah.
wow. And so, do you do that now, though? Like now, you just go
Hunting
to the
now.
grocery?
Yeah, yeah. Now I go to the grocery store. I'm not. I'm actually vegan. It's funny now, so I definitely don't do
Oh,
that. But like, I work in animal rescue, and I got a vet tech license. So when I started working in animal rescue, and I'm so rural, so I don't just rescue like cats and dogs. I work with like livestock that are being mistreated. So I just found it to be like hypocritical to be eating what I rescue. So I went vegan.
No, that's a good enough reason.
I'm vegan.
The only
Yeah, go
thing
ahead.
that's ever confused me, the only thing that's ever confused me about the US is the Pledge of Allegiance and the separation between church and state. Because obviously, when I went to school there, I had secular studies too, so I learned American history and American history and American government. It was one of the classes, and you pledge allegiance to the flag, and you mention God. Every president has to confirm a religion, but Obama wasn't really a churchgoer until he became the president. So how can you pledge allegiance to the flag in school where there's a separation between church and state and you're mentioning God?
Yeah, that's just some American hypocrisy for you.
Yeah, I can never understand it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's much of a separation between church and state, especially with the way it's going with all the laws coming on now. I think we're becoming more of a Christian country. But
Yeah,
I
I think she's
definitely,
on the nose with that. Things that less people are starting to. It shows that like more people are starting not to become religious or Christian anymore, and now there's a pushback.
Yeah.
yes, yeah, I agree with that. Although Ray, I was going to ask you, do you feel like your secular education within yeshiva gave you, like, was a accurate, like, adequate secular education?
Well, yeah, because I graduated with a high school diploma from Fairfax High. So I went and did I did the LA Unified Schools District exams, plus I had to have a specific grade point average, plus I did SAT in the summer.
Oh wow!
So, but I suppose it was sink or swim, because if you didn't, yeah. But the thing is, Auntie Sheitel was a secular teacher in Yeshiva University of LA. You know, where Mr. Ben Shapiro, young Ben, went to. So she was a secular teacher who taught American history, government economics, and American literature. So I had her on my back all the time to make up for the times where, you know, obviously that I was lacking within the secular education. So she sat with me for hours sometimes preparing for, you know, to help me do a term paper and stuff. So that was just me, but there were other people in the class that came from different backgrounds that weren't interested at all. They were just going to go and get their ordination and then not really pay attention, but I did.
Interesting, because even the Orthodox high school I went to, like, there was some stuff in science we didn't learn about, and like some stuff like they just skipped over or we didn't learn about, and we were not necessarily prepared. Like New York has regents, and so we were not prepared really to take the regents. But it is interesting that you got a good secular education in a that's what I mean by, I think Chabad's a bit different, because they do give you secular education in Chabad schools, I think.
They do.
Interesting.
Interesting,
because we didn't really get like...
Yeah, it's up to you. Should you want? I was just in the position that my aunt was, first of all, my uncle was in a Hebrew day school, Hebrew academy. As a teacher, he taught Limodei Kodesh, Holy Studies or Bible Studies, and my aunt taught secular. So she didn't want any of her children to fail. So she was very much on her cases about that, because she said, well, what if you don't want to get ordination? What if you do want to? I mean, one cousin, instead of going to 770, chose to become a computer programmer, and he went off to work for 42nd Street Photo. He worked there for years for 42nd Street Photo. So, you know, at least I will give her that, for all that I have some trauma with regards to her. She did insist in equal amounts of Torah and Limudei Chol, or whatever you call it.
Secular studies. Yeah.
Well, that's what I said it before. Yeah, secular studies. Yeah. So
I have a question for you, Ray. Are you from Ireland?
No, I was born in Scotland. I don't have any Irish blood or anything.
Oh, I don't. I guess it's sorry.
But we are very close as a people. I mean, I suppose Scottish people are very close to Irish as a people. I don't have any.
Are you familiar with like where places of Ireland are?
Yes, I am.
So my mom she's from County Kerry.
Yeah, I love County Kerry is beautiful. I haven't been there for a number of years. The last time I was in Ireland was in Dublin. In Northern Ireland, it was Belfast, and both have Hebrew congregations there. So yeah, but I know County Kerry, but I know Dublin. I'm more comfortable with Dublin,
Yeah.
and I love Irish music.
I don't.
It
I don't like the bagpipes, though. It's one thing I've never quite.
That was the one luxury my mom was allowed to have is she listened to we would have like radio, but it was very much controlled. And we were like so old school about it. It was like records and it would have to be like worship music, or my dad allowed her to listen to Irish music as long as it wasn't to what he called to I don't remember what the word that he used, but basically, if it wasn't too much beat or like
Right.
craziness to it, I guess would be the word that I'm lacking. I don't know how to say it in English, uh, but he would, it would be allowed, and so my mom would always listen to it, and I don't know, I just don't like it now.
I would imagine he was saying not so upbeat, so the likes of Lord of the Dance or River Dance or anything like that would be
Yeah,
too
yeah,
fast.
that
It
would
wouldn't
not
be
be, yeah, it
acceptable.
would be allowed,
So it
and
would be like
it couldn't have any words to it.
Irish songs like I don't know, Roman in the
Yeah,
Gloaming.
no words. It'd have to be it was instrumental
Oh,
only.
instrumental!
Yeah.
My goodness,
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
that's
It's
interesting.
interesting though how like different groups do that with music because like we couldn't listen to any non-Jewish music or anything, and like finding out that in Islam you're not supposed to listen to any instrumental music. So it's interesting how like with every group there's different like things that are surrounding music.
I remember I was so like it's so crazy how like I was so indoctrinated there. I like to tell this story. So like there was so my father had some like had a sister that was I don't know, she was basically not part of the community or anything like that. She was basically shunned, and there was some reason, I don't remember what it was, but it had to do with a family affair. And we ended up going to the house, and I had some cousins, and he was dealing with
Mhm.
something. Our whole family went. We had to travel there, and I remember being in the room with my cousins, and they were listening to some sort of secular music. I have no idea. And I felt so like I was so terrified. I was so scared because I had allowed myself to listen to that and I didn't say anything, that when we got home, I confessed to my father my sin of what I had done, that I had allowed myself to listen to this music, and I took my punishment. And I was so relieved to be punished because I was so terrified of what would happen if I hadn't done that.
Wow.
Wow. Wow. See, that's kind of like the opposite with me. Me and my sister, we used to sneak around the corner, and there was a DVD store that ran their credit cards through a hardware store. So we used to sneak around and use my mom's credit card to buy DVDs, and they would show up on her statement as a charge from the hardware store, and we would buy like Hannah Montana DVDs and stuff like that. We would crack them after we were done and put the pieces of the DVD into different garbages so nobody would know. But it's different. Like we were very proud of that. Like we never confessed to anything. Like we loved that.
Oh, I was terrified. I was so like whatever they did to indoctrinate me, they did a really good job. So,
Well, the first
Greasy,
time,
to answer your question, yeah. So I ended up going back and demanded an X-ray and blood work. And they found out that I do in fact have an infection in my knee. I received
Oh.
intravenous antibiotics yesterday and this
wow,
morning, and I go back two more times to get them.
yeah,
And then I'm on antibiotics. So I was right. And I appreciate you guys encouraging me to do so. I had an infection in my knee.
Wow.
wow.
Yeah.
Deirdre,
I'm glad
I
you
was
got
just,
that figured out.
is it Deirdre or Deirdre?
It's
And then,
Deirdre.
Deirdre, yeah, see, that's the difference. In Britain, you'd be called Deirdre. Deirdre, I'm glad I asked.
Yeah, and it's really funny
So,
because I've met people on here from Ireland and they call me Deirdre. And I've met people here from the UK and they call me Deirdre.
yeah, I should have guessed, first of all, that it was Deirdre.
Yeah.
I was just reading here about Plydutch has spoken about 400,000 Russian Mennonites, most notably in the Latin American countries of Mexico, Peru, Bolivia, Paraguay, Belize, Brazil, Argentina,
Yes.
and Uruguay, along with the United States and Canada and Manitoba. When I was in Winnipeg, in Manitoba, we went out into one of the huge shopping areas in Manitoba. Then we crossed over to North Dakota over the border to a place called Grand Forks. And that's where I saw my first ever Mennonites. And it was a young Mennonite couple, and they were in the mall in Grand Forks, and they were sitting having a Starbucks, sitting on the
Oh,
bench talking
wow.
to each other.
Wait, I thought you can't have oh no, that's Mormons. You can't have coffee.
Yeah, we have coffee. It's definitely the coffee that I drink in my Mennonite community was not as good as Starbucks, I wish. But like
Yeah.
like we made it on a stove. It's pretty disgusting. So
But that's fascinating about about Plydutch. I didn't know that at all about them at all.
yeah. Yeah, and it's and like I like to tell people too, so like the community they come from is Mennonite Brethren, and exclusively the community like there's nowhere else in the United States where it's at. It's in Oregon, Washington, Canada. Like we've gone to Canada for gatherings with different community members, and Mexico, and
Wow.
it's very much different because that's the other thing too, is these conservative Mennonites that come from like Ohio and Pennsylvania. They are so different than us, and they don't speak like Dutch. It's like most of it speak Pennsylvania Dutch, or I guess some variation of that. But there's so different. So like the ones that come, the Mennonites that I found, even the conservative ones that come from like the different part of the United States that are not brethren, they don't actually believe in pew pews, guns and that sort of thing. They don't hunt, and they tend to be more passive.
Yeah.
As in our community, we are politically passive in the sense that you would never join the military or fight in a war. And that's mostly because of the separation of government. But we actually use those and we hunt. And discipline, we very much are into discipline. Like we very much adhere to like the ideology is spare the rod, spoil the child. And the discipline in our communities is so strict that at about 6 months old is when you start disciplining children. So babies will be disciplined at 6 months, and we call it breaking the will.
Wow.
They believe in breaking
Okay.
the will. Yeah.
Wow.
I'm just reading Plydutch phrases now that I found on the internet. It's so I can understand the words.
You know what I love that about you, Ray, that you've taken an interest, that you're looking and researching into that. That's
No,
fantastic. Thank you.
I love language, and this is so interesting that how close it is to German or Yiddish even.
Yes.
You know, one thing is though, Ray, I'm like, I wish I was as well traveled. I hope like I get to be as well traveled as you, because like every time somebody comes on here and they mention like a random country they're from, and you're like, oh, I've been there, and I'm like, oh, okay.
Well, since there's very few people in the room, there's and I shared with you personally the photos of my grandchildren, which I wouldn't do obviously on a live on TikTok.
Yeah.
But since you've shared some things with us, it wasn't always. It was great that I traveled, and it was great that I earned a lot of money, but it was at the expense of my daughter missing me quite a lot. So I did spend a lot of time away from her, and for a period of time we were quite estranged, because it was always having to get to know her, and it was at a time where she was at that age where she was growing up, and I wasn't there to take her to sports day. I wasn't there because I was away working, and I eased my conscience by sending money back every month, and that eased me. So it wasn't always, I have no regrets that I did it, but it did have a cost. It did have a cost because my daughter's period of time where she said, money just isn't everything, and it would have been good if you had been there constantly. But So I didn't want to put a dampener on it, but you understand why I was telling you. It's not, it's been great, but I had to pay a price.
Right. It comes at a cost with
It came at a
relationships and
cost
stuff
for
like
me, yeah.
that. Yeah.
I mean, it's great now.
Yeah.
It's beautiful now, and and I just love to be, for her to say, "I love you, Dad," and
Mhm.
I got it, I got it when there, but instead of tears and saying, "When am I going to see you next?" or "When are you coming?" and and I thought, oh well, I'll just send money because money could ease my conscience, but in the long term, but in the end, I gave them a great life, but
Yeah.
yeah, it came with a cost. It wasn't.
Yeah.
So what countries have you been to?
Oh, countries I've lived in, not countries that I visited, but countries I've lived in as a resident have been in Denmark, and that was for a year and a half, but split between two periods. I was in Gibraltar, which is a British colony on the border of Spain. I was there for 5 years, and in between that 5 years, I lived between Spain and Gibraltar. So it's like walking over the border from, you know, um, any border that you have in the US that you can just cross the county line. They're so close to each other.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I would live in Spain and work in Gibraltar and come back every day, so I get the best of both worlds. I lived in Israel, well, combined, 12 years.
Wow.
I lived in Cyprus, and that was for 6 months. And I was working there as a in a hotel at the time, and I lived in the US and worked in the US and for a period of time in a part-time job. So that's where I've lived. But I
Where did
visited
you live in the US?
I lived in California in LA.
Oh, ugh.
I lived in La La Land pretty much.
Ugh.
Within walking distance to Hollywood Boulevard. But I
Yeah,
was
I just I have to go to Los Angeles sometimes for my work. We get a lot of I'm on the Pacific Northwest, so I'm in southern Oregon, like an hour from the Northern California border and a couple hours from Humboldt. So that's the area that I'm in. And so
okay.
we have to go to Los Angeles to get animals from the rescue there, from the kill shelters. We bring them back to our shelter
Wow.
to save them. And every time I have to go to Los Angeles, we have a joke. We fight about who has to go because we don't want to go because I hate Los Angeles so much.
Well, imagine when I was going to school there and living in I lived off of the famous Melrose Avenue. I was in between Melrose Avenue and Beverly Boulevard, which, if nobody knows, is the home of
Yeah, I
Farmers
know
Market and
exactly.
CBS
Yeah.
Studios. Yes, I was right in between there. And I was so it was not the 90s; it was the 80s. I used to walk from my house to my school or to the yeshiva, and by the time I got to the seminary to the school, my eyes were watering from smog.
Wow.
I could see the Hollywood sign from the walk that I was doing to school, and if I couldn't see the sign, that was a very smoggy day. It was very, very dirty when I lived there, but I felt safe. I never had
Oh, you go
you
do it
know
now if you think it was dirty then.
yeah, thank God I never had any. I wasn't I wasn't attacked. There was no violence.
That
I
area
never
is so dirty,
experienced.
and I always make a joke like it's a good day if you don't like almost step on the needle. Like it's so disgusting
Yeah,
there.
friends that I'm still in contact with that still live in LA, and the cousin that I did speak to sadly passed away a number of just over a month ago. Was the only religious cousin that kind of we healed wounds and we were in touch, and sadly I lost her last month. But
Oh, I'm
they
so
told
sorry
me
to
that
hear that.
no, it's okay, thank you. And she told me as well that Melrose Avenue, and I don't know if you know the end of Melrose Avenue that meets Fairfax Avenue, which is a very Jewish street, the long Jewish
Yeah.
street with all the Cantor's Deli and all the deli kosher places.
Yes.
Yeah, because the school right in the corner there was called Fairfax High School, and that's where I went to get my diploma to get to pass the exams to get my high school diploma.
So, host, are you in New York?
Well, I grew up in New York. Right now I'm in Jersey. I'm in the tri-state area. But yeah, I grew up in New York.
New
I've always
Jersey.
wanted to go to the East Coast. The only experience I've ever had with New York was in the airport, so I don't think that counts.
I mean, it's good. It's good. I don't like going to the city anymore like I did for a while, but it gets too much. Although I would love to move back to Brooklyn because there I'm an insomniac. So like I go to sleep really early, like I'm exhausted now. But during the night I get up and I need fresh air in order to fall back asleep. And in Brooklyn, it was great because everything's still open all hours of the night and you feel very
Yeah.
safe walking around. But here, I cannot walk around. I can go like right outside my apartment building to get fresh air, but walking around would not be safe where I am now.
Oh dear.
Not at all. Yeah.
I want to go see. I want to go see New Jersey where the Sopranos were.
Oh, with the Sopranos are? Yeah. Yeah. No, New Jersey's nice. It's got a lot of the same perks as New York is, but being cheaper. Besides for like this, I feel like it's safer in New York to go out at night and stuff when it's not safer here.
I've always wanted to like visit New York, but I'd probably be very overwhelmed by everything. I live like so rural, like it's crazy how rural I live, and that's all I can't. I lived a little while in Portland and it was just too much for me. I cannot, and I think it's because the way I grew up in the middle of the woods and so out, I cannot handle like I'm